Okay, happy. I believe it's Thursday. It's been a long week for yours truly, but I think it's Thursday, and that's a good start. My name's Kyle Curtis. I am joined by Steve McRae, as always, wherever he is on this screen. Steve, where are
I'm
you?
here. I'm here up the corner, left, right, no,
In the
up,
corner left.
down, more middle,
Good.
somewhere
Good.
there. It's all relative.
Frankie is with us, and we have SJ, who we have tried to, I guess, come on the show and be a part of what we've got going on here for a long time. Some scheduling difficulty has, kind of gotten in the way of that up until now, but we are so excited that she is with us. SJ Thompson, thank you for coming on. We are glad to have you here, and I think that we're going to have a pretty interesting discussion tonight, because if anyone follows her on Twitter, and they should if they don't, depending on which side of the fence you're on, you either love her or you hate her. Is that an accurate depiction of your Twitter following?
That's on the money.
So I figured that before we get into the subject that we're going to be talking about, that I wanted to kind of get an answer to a question that I had, because I was listening to a particular stream in December, and this particular individual stream situation usually doesn't have the brightest kind of people that watch that stream. So I heard you and your points, and it was you and Darth Dawkins, and I found you in a Brett Keane stream. Now, please, for the record, tell me, what in the world were you doing in a Brett Keane hangout?
It's very funny. Well, what happened was it all started with Max Colby, actually. Max Colby, and you had him on not too long ago with Crocoduck, and Max Colby, through some friends of his in a direct message group that I'm on with on Twitter, actually said that he'd like me to get in contact with Brett Keane. So I said, all right. I didn't know Brett Keane. I'd never been in Brett Keane's chat. So somehow the next thing I know, I went onto his God TV radio page, and I found myself in this chat room. And then I found myself talking to somebody called Darth Dawkins. I had no idea what his position was, and it was different than mine. And I started getting annoyed, and then my computer went out, and I was pretty happy about that. So that's what happened.
The fact that you're able to come back to streams after that introduction to those are two entities that just wasn't fair to you.
So wait, what do you think of Darth? Because Darth is obviously a theist. He's an evangelical theist. What was your impression of his approach to sharing the gospel among the unrighteous and non-believer?
Well, his approach is unique. For one, he has me blocked now. So I.
That's a great approach. I'm going to proselytize to you, and you're blocked. Of course, you're
he was pre-supping her. He was pre-supping her.
Oh, I'm sure he was.
Knowing that she was a fellow Christian, I've sat there. I was just shaking my head. I was like, she obviously can't know who these individuals are, because if she did, then she would be nowhere near. I'm just saying it stood out, the fact that you were there, and that doesn't happen very often. So now that we've got that out of the way, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and why you're kind of in the whole atheist-theist debate.
Okay, I'm S.J. Thomason. I'm in Florida. I work in a university. I teach business courses. Right now I'm teaching human resource management and to undergraduates, and I teach a leadership course that involves executive coaching to MBA students. So those are the two classes that I teach right now. This summer I'll be teaching an executive MBA class. So I'm pretty excited about that on leadership, and I'll also be teaching a class on career development and some international management. So that's what I do for a living. 2014 I got on Twitter kind of actively and started thinking about promoting a little fiction book that I'd written, Christian fiction, and one thing led to another. The next thing I know, I was in contact with a bunch of different atheists, and actually, to be honest, the only atheists I really even know are the ones that I've met on Twitter. My husband had a relative who was an atheist who passed away before I got to know him. And I know there's a guy at my school who's an atheist. He's very vocal and he follows me on Twitter, but I really don't know him. So I've gotten to know some atheists, and I found a lot of them are really nice people. So a lot of them, some of them aren't, but that actually I've seen that in the Christian community. So
Sure.
So I've seen it on both sides.
I hesitate to make this this joke, but I can't because you put it out there, and I feel like I have to respond to it. So hopefully it's not too early to do this. But you said that you wrote a book called Christian Fiction, right?
Yeah, it wasn't called Christian fiction. It's a Christian fiction book about it's a young adult romance, and it's just a little story I made up, and so that was my original thing. And then I started writing blogs in 2016, and so that's what I've been doing lately.
I was going to make the isn't that an oxymoron joke, but you know.
I know I set myself up for that, didn't I?
So we are having this stream to discuss probably one of the cornerstones, I think, of Christianity, and that is this weekend, actually, the Easter story. Jesus' crucifixion, his burial, and then rising from the grave 3 days later. So you are in the position where you think that you can give reasons and evidence for that being true, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so where would you like to begin on this issue? I think Steve, you're flexible with having her kind of pick her starting point, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I think that there are some facts out there that we know that even people who are skeptical historians agree to. They agree to the fact that there was an empty tomb. When the women arrived at the tomb, it was empty, and they agree to the fact that there were women who made the discovery of the empty tomb. Most people agree that Joseph of Arimathea was the one who buried Jesus, and then people will agree that the women, after they went to the empty tomb, that some experiences occurred for the women and occurred for the apostles. And these experiences, whatever they were, and people who are skeptical will say that there were some experiences that occurred. When these experiences occurred, it changed these people. And at one point they were hiding, and then they came out of hiding. And for decades, many of them preached, even though they weren't protected with any legal rights, they preached Christianity. And in many cases, they died very gory deaths because of it. They were imprisoned. They were stoned. We have people like Stephen was stoned. Paul was beheaded by Nero in 62. Peter was hung upside down on a cross. James was also killed. So these people were all martyred for their faith. And so the big question is that you kind of have to ask is, why would they do it if it were just a vision? Why would they do it if it were just something that was temporary? So they really believed something. And so I think that those facts, to me, are very compelling.
I don't think it'd be in question that they believe that honestly, but I would say it's kind of the same. You could ask the same question for why people fly planes into buildings thinking that they will be rewarded with heaven. There's a sort of a blind faith that you follow when you're into that sort of thing. So why couldn't it just be that they actually thought that was happening, but it wasn't the case?
Okay, well, here's what they said. They thought that they said that they saw Jesus, and Jesus was present with them for 40 days before he was taken up into heaven, and that's one thing that we know. So it wasn't just a vision. I know that people like Richard Carrier suggests that it was just a vision, or some of them had a collective vision. They all had the same vision. A lot of people say these kind of things, or they say that they were delusional. But if you think about it, how that compares to the martyrs of today. The martyrs of today didn't say that they saw Allah. They never made the claim they've seen Allah. In fact, no Muslims have ever made the claim that they've seen Allah. So what we have people who made the claim that they actually saw the Son of God. And so they saw the Son of God, and he rose from the dead, and he resurrected from the dead. So those claims are very compelling and very unlike what the martyrs of today are saying.
Could we agree, though, that by today's standards, eyewitness testimony isn't that credible and can sometimes be misconstrued as something else or just wrong entirely?
Well, yeah, sure. And that's why you want to gather testimonies from multiple eyewitnesses. So even in a courtroom, they always want to involve multiple people. And we have quite a few people at this time who were eyewitnesses. So according to Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, we have over 500 people who are eyewitnesses. And so in 1 Corinthians 15 is a formula that was something that was repeated in the very early church. So it was a memorized formula, and it indicated that over 500 people had seen the risen Christ, or 500 people. I don't know if it's over or 500, but 500 people, including the apostles and including Paul. So we've got some supported claims by multiple people.
Okay, so let's grant you that. Let's say there were 500 that say they saw that. By today's standards, in court, we also have other means by which we try to convict, through physical evidence or things of that nature. It's very rare that eyewitness testimony alone will, be enough. So let's take their accounts aside. Is there any proof that you have, physical or anything of that nature, that would back up the claims that they made?
Well, there is some archaeological proof that supports a lot of the New Testament things. For example, they've found archaeological proof of Pontius Pilate. I think there was a finding in 1990 that indicated support for. Oh no, I'm sorry, it was earlier than that for Pontius Pilate. There also is some proof that they found remains of Caiaphas. They've indicated that the empty tomb is, I think it's called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So they have indicated that that's where they think that Jesus was buried. So we have that kind of support. As far as other sorts of support, we have 9 secular sources. We have, within 150 years of Jesus' death, we have 9 secular sources, and I've posted a blog naming those sources, and they include people like Tacitus and Josephus and that. We also have 33 Christian sources within the first 150 years of Jesus' resurrection, who provide support both in the Bible and outside of the Bible. So there are a lot of people who provide support, and we do have some archaeological support. For example, we've got some archaeological support of oh shoot, I'm forgetting. Let me come back to that because I'll have to remember.
Sure.
But there's some archaeological support of a coin that Quirinius had, and a coin that indicated when Quirinius was in power as a proconsul in Sicilia. So we have that support too. So there's some archaeological support. There's some historical support. There are a lot of arguments in support just of God, and for example, the moral argument I find extremely compelling. So,
So okay, I'll grant you. Let's say I grant you what you just said in terms of physical evidence, that all of that is 100% accurate, and they found the tomb of Jesus. That only gets you a third of the way through the argument. Okay,
they didn't find the tomb though. They found the Pilate stone, right? I mean, Pontius Pilate, the inscription they found,
right?
Which I agree with, but
I
probably was referring
to
him, sure, but that wasn't the tomb.
Yeah, I meant to say it was Caiaphas. I didn't mean to say it was Pontius Pilate's tomb.
Because that's a different thing. There's a rock out there that has a transcription that supposedly will, and that's fine. I agree with that, but I don't think that really corresponds to them finding the tomb per se.
No. I wanted to say that in the church that I had mentioned before, that was where they think that's where the tomb is. But I misspoke a little bit. Caiaphas was the one where they found an ossuary,
Gotcha.
So there was a burial box.
Gotcha.
So let's grant you that they've even found the actual tomb that where Jesus was buried. I don't know enough to say whether he was an actual person or not, and so I'm not going to make that claim one way or the other. I don't know. So if there was an actual individual named Jesus and he was crucified and he was buried, how do we then go to the step that after 3 days he was resurrected and then ascended into heaven?
Well, I think that's where we have to pay attention to the people who are making those claims. And so the people who are making those claims were the ones who wrote the 42 different that have said things in 42 different sources that indicate support for the New Testament in different ways. There's different types of support. But also just to look at the way that the apostles acted in the first decades following Jesus's resurrection. If they hadn't seen him, and that they had every want to have seen him, but if they had not seen him, certainly they wouldn't have come out and started preaching so boldly. And they were imprisoned, they were jailed. I mean, sorry, they were imprisoned, they were stoned, they were beaten, all these kind of things. They were flogged. They really went through hell just so they could spread the good news. And so if they had not seen him, they would have stayed in hiding and they would have gone back to their fishing jobs and everything would have been hunky-dory and back in their families and that kind of thing. Instead, they were out there going from country to country, spreading the news. So they didn't live a very pleasant life afterwards, but they felt that it was the right thing to do, and because of what they saw.
But we can't know that they would actually do that. They would do that. We can't know for sure that they would stay in hiding and everything would be hunky-dory. What my point is this, that let's say on another end, if you're a disciple and you follow a man named Jesus and he claims to be the Son of God, and you believe that, like you honestly, wholeheartedly believe that he is the Son of God, I think if you're that kind of enthralled with that following, it's going to be almost second nature to, after you watch your leader get crucified, there's almost kind of like this is going to embolden me to preach more. So why couldn't it have been that they were martyred for the simple fact that they continued to preach what Jesus did, and they were saying that he came back to kind of vindicate his death or give that, some kind of meaning? I mean, because that argument right there, I think, has just as much merit and just as much evidence to back it up than what you just put forth in terms of eyewitness testimony, because that's just not a good way that we can judge what's true and what's not.
That's a good point. And what I'd like to say is, if you look in the book of Acts, there's actually a verse, and I quoted it in my most recent blog, but I don't remember the exact person who spoke the verse. But the person in the book of Acts cited other people who had died and who had a following, and how the following dissipated after these other people had passed away. And it's most likely that in fact, in that book of Acts, that person said that if this is a true movement, if this is something that is supported by God, this movement will not die. And what's amazing is, by the year 313, when Constantine legalized Christianity, there were already, according to historians and secular historians, there were already between 5 and 6 million people following Christianity. So it wasn't like all of these other cases. There were people who were killed in the past, and people during those times who were following other people. They believed these people were miracle workers or whatever it was, but the following always died down. And so in this case, it didn't die down. And I think that provides support that this particular case is endorsed by God.
Why couldn't we say the same thing about, let's say, Muhammad? Because there are just as many on that side that would say that he actually did ascend to the moon, on a winged horse. How do you decide which one of these two are the one that you're going to go with? Because they're both so diametrically apart, but yet they flourish. You know what I mean? Like, they both have a huge following that really hasn't slowed down. So how do you... But
that's a great question, and actually, you have a good point, because we have 1.6 million people are following the Islam faith, mm-hmm. and we have just over 2 billion people, 1.6 billion people, and 2 billion people following the Christian faith. So they're catching up to us, and with their birth rates, there have been some forecasts that they might actually go past us. There might actually be more Muslims in the world, say 100 years from now, at their current birth rates and at our low current birth rates, because Christians tend to be in some of the developed countries, and we don't have very high birth rates. Whereas in the Muslim countries, they have very high birth rates in some of the Arab countries. And so we have that going on right now. So that's a great question. Let me add a couple of points.
Sure.
One point is, Muhammad was one person who wrote a book right around the year 600 something, I think 630 or something like that. So Muhammad wrote a book, this one man, one book. The Bible was written by 40 authors over 1,500 years and across 3 continents. So the Bible also included 330 prophecies in the Old Testament of Jesus that included prophecies such as Isaiah 53, Isaiah 9:6. Those foretold his birth and his resurrection and his death. Psalm 22, which also very much detailed Christ's crucifixion, also spoke of, there are just a number of verses. So the Quran does not have these kind of prophecies. Quran was written by one man over one period of time. And that's actually the same as all of these other religious books that are out there. They were written in a single generation by a single person. So the Bible is unique in that way. And another way, as far as the Quran and Allah.
I'll stop you right there first so we can talk about that and then jump to your next point. Just so we can touch.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't you trust, I think, an account more by a book that was written by one person instead of hundreds? Like, wouldn't it make more sense to follow that one instead of the one that has had so many hands, in the pot? It seems like that's where everything gets muddled up. So I don't know if that would necessarily be a positive thing in terms of the Bible, because there are the opportunities to add and take away and change. You know what I mean?
I do. And actually, the fact that the Bible's coherent, it was written in 3 different languages. The fact it's actually coherent, it all sort of works together is something that's a testimonial to its truth. Another thing is, think of the way Muhammad went about. So Muhammad, when he was in power, he was in power. He was murdering people. He was doing all kinds of things like that. He was married to 12 different women, including one of them who was as young as 9 years old when he consummated the marriage. So we have a very different person who gained a lot of power, took over a lot of land, did a lot of things like that. Jesus was not like that. Jesus actually said those who live by the sword will die by the sword. He was a peacemaker. And the early Christians, I mean, I know in later times, during the medieval times and that, I know the Christians did not do all the right things, but in the first 300 years, they were a peace-loving folk. And they weren't gaining power, they weren't gaining land, and they were practicing it in hiding illegally because they didn't want to be torched by people like Nero, who enjoyed torching them, and that's according to Tacitus. So,
didn't Jesus also say, though, that he comes not to bring peace, but to bring the sword?
He was referring to the sword in that particular case, is referring to the word of God. So he said, because when they use the word the sword in the New Testament, sometimes it refers to the word of God, and that's the way that he spoke. And as you know, Jesus didn't kill anybody.
No, and I would never say they did, but, well,
or it wasn't recorded.
Here's where it gets confusing, because Jesus never killed anybody, but
that we know of.
God did.
Well, how do we know Jesus didn't kill anybody? I mean,
but they're the same person. This is what I don't understand. If they're in of one himself, the Holy Trinity, Jesus and God, so they're basically the same person. God killed a bunch of people back in the Old Testament. I mean, it was horrid the amount of people that he killed. So technically, couldn't we say that by proxy Jesus actually did too?
I know there's a lot of arguments for the Old Testament. I think of the Old Testament as sort of paving the way for Christianity and paving the way for Jesus. And God had chosen a very distinct group of people. He tried to single them out, the Jews, and he tried to make them, he gave them a lot of practices that were contrary to those of other people in his times, in those times, I should say. And so in making the path for Jesus, I think, yes, there were some cases where there were battles being waged, and the walls of Jericho came down, for example. There were a lot of things where people were killed, and in some cases, we're looking back on that and judging it, but it's kind of hard to judge it, because I might look back and say, well, how were the Canaanites? Were they like ISIS? Is there a justification in the long run for having let these Canaanites go? So there are situations like that I look back and I can guess that God did not do this with malicious intentions. He did this to pave the path.
What about everyone with the flood, except for the people that were in the ark? I mean, that's an entire planet that was drowned for, what he called some type of sin, and he saved only a family. What about the kids that were on the planet at that time? I mean, surely they can't be guilty of anything.
Well, let's. I hate to share my views on the first 11 chapters of Genesis, but I guess I'll share my views on the first 11 chapters of Genesis.
Just get comfortable.
I'm not exactly sure how I interpret some of these chapters in Genesis. I haven't completely developed a concrete interpretation of what was going on with the ark. In some ways, I want to lean towards the fact that perhaps there's a metaphor here. In other ways, I could say, well, maybe there is some literal interpretation that I should be adopting. I'm not exactly sure.
So, you know why you're doing that? Do you know why you're doing that? Because at your core, you are human, and you know that deep down, that is not the way any loving God would ever do to anyone. And you know what? I commend people like, Christians like you that are able to say that, who aren't die hard to, God flooding an entire planet, whether you believe it or not. I think that you should be commended for at least having that. I mean, it's just it's an inner human feeling that's not right. And so I think it's a good thing that you're kind of on that same page. So we may disagree on a lot, but we're there.
No, it's good to come to some agreement. I think that's sure. how you get to the end result.
Absolutely. You would be surprised, though, how many people will defend that instance in the Bible, whether it happened or not. But anyway, please continue with what you're saying.
Well, going back to Darth Dawkins, that's exactly what we were talking about. That's exactly the conversation I found myself in, and I thought I just, I don't know the Old Testament nearly as well as I know the New Testament. I was raised a Catholic. I'm not a Catholic any longer, but I was raised a Catholic. And so Catholics tend to really focus on the New Testament. And I barely remember even looking at the Old Testament as part of the church or any of that kind of stuff. So we were always talking about the New Testament and Jesus. And so I didn't even have an Old Testament in my house until probably about 6 years ago when I was born again. So I didn't even have one. And then I went out and bought one, and I read it, but I have to admit I don't enjoy it nearly as much as the New Testament, and I don't study Genesis. I've read Genesis, but I don't sit and study it nearly as much as I want to study exactly what happened in the New Testament.
But how do you kind of set that with the overall theme of what the Bible is and what it says? Because it's supposed to be the infallible Word of God. So if you are instructed to take this as the actual inspired Word of God, how can you decide which parts that you're okay with and which ones you're not, knowing that that's there? You know what I mean? Like it's not going anywhere. It's part of the Bible, and it's part of the God that you worship and that you every day wake up and dedicate your life to. So I know it's not enjoyable, and nobody, normal people don't like to get involved in any of that, but I guess my question is, how could you actively serve a deity like that's willing to do that to an entire population of people? Like, what is it that kind of makes the trade-off there?
Here's what I would think. I would assume, I make a couple of assumptions here, and I think they're big assumptions, but I think they're fair assumptions. One assumption is that God is omniscient. He's concurrently in the past, present, and future, and that's not an assumption. That's actually something that is said in the Bible. But God's omniscience means that he basically knew exactly what those people were capable of, and he knew that apparently they were extremely evil. I mean, if there were people around in Noah's time, and this is a literal story, then the people who were on the earth besides Noah and his small group were, as the Bible had said, very evil people who had taken to very evil things. And so God might have thought to himself, the world is going to be basically ruled by Satan, and with a bunch of Satan type of people. Even if you go back to some of the Old Testament stories, we've got a lot of different stories of people who were killing their babies. They were sacrificing babies. Pagans were sacrificing babies. So they weren't doing a lot of the right things in the Old Testament. But it's hard to put our lens on and judge that stuff right now today in the year 2018, because we're not in those times. We didn't see those people. I can make an assumption that the Canaanites were probably like ISIS, but clearly that's an assumption. It's an assumption based on the words of a couple of authors in the Bible. So what I like to focus much more on is Jesus' resurrection, Jesus' life, his ministry, and his messages to us. Also, what wasn't disputed that we haven't even talked about is Jesus' miracles. So we haven't really made mention of the fact that even people outside of the Bible attested to the fact that he was magic, or he was doing some sort of magic. It was attested to, for example, by Jewish people at that time. So
Let's go with that then. Let's make the case for the miracles then. Pick one and let's go with that and see where it takes us.
Well, there were a lot of miracles mentioned. Who wouldn't like a guy that can turn water into wine, right? He'd be the life of every party, would you say?
I'm following him. Yeah. Have you found me a Messiah that could convert water to beer? I'd be a lot happier. But hey, I'm not picky. German Messiah.
So we've got a guy who's got some pretty good ideas, but also if we look at we've already gone over the resurrection. That's the biggest miracle. In fact, if that particular miracle didn't occur, that would be something that Christianity wouldn't even be here. So if, in fact, somebody on Twitter told me, he said, it was an atheist, and he said, I'll grant you the resurrection for the sake of argument. And I thought to myself, that's really granting me Christianity altogether, because that's the foundation of Christianity. So
I was getting ready to say, I will not grant you that same, just because on the fact that, I guess before we go to miracles, because you said that we finished with the resurrection. I don't think that we have finished with the resurrection. Not quite yet. Because taking the scripture aside and taking the eyewitness accounts aside, how do we account for a person rising from the grave and then going up into heaven? Let me ask you this question first. When you hear stories like that are depicted in the Quran, like the winged horse flying to the moon, does that strike you as something that is plausible, or do you think that's just insane? There's no way that a winged horse could get to the moon.
Well, no, I don't think a winged horse made it to the moon. I don't think Muhammad has any legitimacy. I think Muhammad was after power. I also think the fact that Muhammad said that Jesus wasn't even crucified. Muhammad said, made a statement that makes some Muslims believe that another man was crucified in Jesus's place, and this other man never said anything. And I've actually talked to some Muslims about that, and they say, well, it's not a big deal that we think that. I think, well, that's actually saying that Christianity has no merit, because the crucifixion and resurrection are exactly the foundation of Christianity. So that one statement by Muhammad kind of tells me a lot about him and a lot about where his source of information came from.
But I think we could apply that same account to Christianity. Power. You answered the question right there. It's all about power. It's all about controlling a group of people, a race, a civilization. You set books. You write a book, right? You say there's a God. He watches you, and if you are bad, he will send you to a place where you burn for eternity. Now, the key is that they lock you in by saying even the smallest just shred of doubt will put you in jeopardy of the flames of hell. So what does that, especially back then, before information was everywhere, the moment that you start catching yourself thinking, well, I don't know if this makes any kind of sense, you then are hit with, wait a minute, that means that I'm going to burn. I have to stop this right now. I can't be naturally inquisitive. But when you hear stories about a flying horse to the moon, that sounds ridiculous, because that's your natural brain, yourself going, there's no way that could possibly be happening. But you're willing to make those concessions when it comes to Christianity. And I'm lost in the why that would be the way to go instead of the winged horse. Because a man rising from the dead 3 days later after being crucified is just as preposterous as a winged horse flying to the moon.
But again, the difference is the early Muslims were Muslim warriors who accumulated power, killed a lot of people, and did a number of things that were very bad. The early Christians had no power. So we mentioned power. They didn't have any power until the year 313. So that's when they came into power. Even though there were 5 to 6 million adherents at that time, they didn't have any power. They were peace-loving people. Now, I'll give you the Crusades and the things that occurred in later centuries. Those were terrible examples of how Christians acted wrongly. But to go back to your hell point, because you were actually making the hell point, one thing that God has given all of us is a moral compass. And I think that having this moral compass and that the fact that he is our source of morality tells me that the punishment is going to fit the crime. So if a person is merely a bit doubtful, do you really think that God's going to burn him for eternity for having a few questions?
Your book says yes.
No, it doesn't say they're going to burn for eternity for having a few questions. So it doesn't say that.
And just for clarification,
Disbelief.
not all Christians think there's this damnable eternal hell. Some think there's a limited hell. Some people think there's annihilation. It's not that the Bible says it; it's how you want to read it.
But that's my entire point. That's why there's so many denominations nowadays. Like, you can read, if I was a deity, right, and I did all of this intricate work to make things function how they do, and everything is so precise and particular, I should be able and capable of leaving a set of instructions that lay out everything perfectly. Like, this is what you need to do in order to have eternal life, in order to go to paradise. And these are the things that if you do, you will burn in hell for. Instead, we're left with a book that is full of contradictions and does not leave anything concrete. You can interpret things many different ways, which is why you have Catholics and Methodists, Baptists, Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, it runs the gambit, because they all see a verse, the same verse, and they decide that this says this, and somebody else says, no, that is not what this says. It says
you got Brett Keane.
So why why not leave a standard set of instructions to either follow or not? And you know the risk if you don't follow them.
I think that God wanted to, I mean, actually, I've read people's views on this, and I think the views are kind of interesting. I've read people who have the view that that there's God purposefully has some ambiguity in the Bible, and one of the reasons why that's on purpose is so people don't feel like they're puppets to him, and that they have to be a puppet, and they have to necessarily follow him. God gave us a choice not to follow him, and I think some people have said that he put enough ambiguity in the Bible so that people who want to doubt him can doubt him. As far as my view on hell, I think it's pretty clear what's in the Bible. I think there's a time when people pass that they're put in sort of a waiting period, and then I think what it says in the book of Revelation is there's a final judgment. And so, in my opinion, an ideal situation would be people who maybe didn't believe right now in that time between now and the final judgment. Hopefully, at that point, clearly you're going to believe something if you're still around, right? So if you're still in spirit form, suddenly you'd realize, hey, there is a God. So that whole belief I had didn't work out. So then what happens next? So
let me. Okay, I can answer a question.
One second, Steve, then I'll turn it over to you
sure.
for how long. Let me just make this one last point, and then it's all you. If God,
am I here?
Yes, you are.
You are.
Can you hear me?
Craig?
Can you actually hear me? Yes.
Welcome aboard.
Jesus,
okay,
is that you?
that's
yes.
Craig.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to connect. Is
Man,
that
you
me?
came
That
in
says,
saying this is the voice of God.
this
That
is
would be
it. This
awesome.
is God, people. God has arrived.
Hold on 1 second.
Everybody, silence in the
Kyle's
house.
got a
Greg,
question.
Is that me, CR?
Greg.
Is that me,
You're too
CR?
excited. Calm down, Greg. We're gonna
Greg,
get to you. I
relax.
promise.
Hang on, we'll get to you. 1 sec.
We're
We're
gonna get to
live.
you. Relax. You're all
okay.
citizen. You will get all the time that you want. Just let me. I have one more point that I want to kind of get to before we get sidetracked and lost in the different direction. But I want to ask one final question. If God gave us freedom of choice to do whatever we want, do we really have it? Because he gave it to us. Is that really the freedom to do whatever we want? If he's saying that we can have it?
Let me ask you this, Kyle. Are you doing whatever you want now?
Yes, but I don't adhere to a God. I mean,
Well,
that's
but
not
you have that choice, so you're exercising your free will.
But if it's how you say it is, I can only do this because he said I could, meaning that he could also decide not to let me do this anytime he wanted to. So, I mean, do I really have free reign as long as he says it's okay?
I think you have free reign right now. It's quite obvious. You're doing exactly as you please.
Right. See, there's the key, though, right now. So then I really don't have freedom of choice.
No, I think your entire life you're going to have freedom of choice. It's you could live this same way that you're living right now for the next 5 decades. You look pretty young. Might be 5 more decades. And
Don't do it. But you said it right there, though. You said could. You keep using the words could, would, not definitely. Like, can you say that I will definitely be able to live the way that I am right now?
you will definitely be able to live the way you are right now. I'm just saying that you could also live a different way. You might make a decision in a year that changes your mind on everything. So
I've already been on that side. I came on this side. I've already been on the Christian side. I did for 25 years actually practice pretty religiously, no pun intended, religion. But my point is that if you have a deity that says, I'm going to give you free will, that also means he can take it away anytime he wants to. Let me ask you this. Could God take away my free will anytime he wanted to?
well,
He could technically.
So then I do not have free will.
You have free will that God has given to you. God is sovereign, which means
Right.
he could, in theory, God could take away your free will anytime you want. But that actually answers, wait, hold on. Because that actually answers the question of evil. Because you, in theory, God could take away your free will anytime and want. In practice, he has limited his power in relationship to you, wherein you are free to do whatever you want. And God doesn't stop you. He doesn't if you go to light a cigarette, God doesn't freeze you in your tracks. Could, doesn't. Gives you free will. Never violates his covenant with you, giving you free will. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, you actually.
In other words,
you actually just proved my point that it's ultimately not free will if it can be taken away. Because if he can say
no, because that's why people wind up in hell, and people go, well, why didn't God stop him? Because God has made himself not violate ever your free will
at that point,
except upon rare occasions.
At that point, but could he?
Yes, sovereign. Sovereign means sovereign, which means he could just poof, make you fall down right now.
Sure.
So yeah.
Which means I don't really have free will. I have the ability to choose how I please currently.
Well, technically, okay, correct in that sense. I mean, technically, it's a free will that you have been given, so it can, of course, be revoked. And maybe there are times.
Do you see the problem there? It's not free will.
I like him already. Where have you been this entire time?
But I don't want to have.
I was trying to connect with Skype. I was trying to hook up.
Giving you a hard time, man. Giving you a hard time.
I don't see how somebody can say you have free will, which is basically the conditions that you make choices independent of outside external influence, and then say it's conditional upon God only allowing it. Because at that point, do you really have the decision-making abilities? You're just at the whim of God not changing the uniformity of nature.
God has granted you the free will. Now,
that's the point.
He could revoke it at any time, but he does not. That is why there is so much evil in the world.
But we don't know well, hang on. We don't know he does not. He could, because he's sovereign. He could change the fundamental constants of the universe tomorrow. We can say that the laws of physics may not work tomorrow if God deems it that he doesn't want them to work. We have no ability to say God is going to keep uniform in nature. We assume it if you're a Christian, right? It's assumed, but it's no way you can say God won't do that. That's, I think, Kyle's argument.
I think we should probably you should probably introduce yourself, Greg, before we go any further, so people.
Oh yeah, hi Craig.
Hi, how's it going? My name is Craig Reed. I do Twitter debates, and I'm a kind of Twitter free floating evangelist figure, and that's about it. I've been doing this
as long as God allows you to be, right, Greg?
So God willing, yes. I stand in the grace of God. As long as God is willing, I will continue to do my Twitter thing.
Let me catch you up. Huh?
I don't really know enough how to function this without. I'm afraid I'm going to turn on the video and then everyone's going to see me. And
I'm glad you're here, Greg.
I'm glad to be here.
Let me catch up to speed real quick, and then we'll jump right into the conversation.
Cool.
So we were having a discussion about. We've kind of been all over the place, which I think is good because it gives a broader issue. But we started with the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, kind of asking for the evidence aside from the eyewitness testimony.
Okay.
And SJ, like I said earlier, my brain is just ran ragged from events earlier in the day. But then we went to
I heard that
Genesis. And the destruction of like we were talking about how you justify following a deity that can at times be so destructive and just evil. I mean, there's no other way to put it. The flood was evil. So we were kind of going into that whole, how do you justify
Okay.
serving that kind of deity? Anything you want to offer up on that before we?
No, I was actually kind of cool with where we're at. We're in this free will versus. That's a one that comes up a lot with atheists. So I was into that one. I was on it.
You're a smart man, Greg. I'll give you that. And it's like I told SJ.
Well, there are. I mean, I'll just say one thing, that there are rabbit holes where conversations turn into like just non-productive back and forths on certain of those topics.
And I don't
Obviously, right. So I'm cool with where we're at. Wherever we're at right now with the free will thing, I was good with it.
A great conversation so far. I don't think we've been under any rabbit holes, but it's kind of refreshing to be able to have a discussion about these kind of things without everybody talking over each other and trying to get their point of view across by yelling, because I'm not the kind of person that believes just because you can yell out or your point is automatically taken more so than anyone else.
I agree.
I
agree.
I agree too.
Yeah. So
I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll agree.
So let's pick up with the free will thing. Where do you want to kind of offer in your view on that, and we'll go from there.
Well, what we were just talking about was actually pretty on point. You have been granted free will.
Mm-hmm.
That is, there is a precondition, or not a precondition. There is the obvious that the God that we are positing exists is a sovereign God, which means he could technically revoke your free will anytime he so pleases. He does not. There is a covenant that he has made with you, the human being, wherein he will not. Now, somebody, I forget which guy, said something about, how do you know he won't? Or I don't know. Somebody offered up something about that little piece right there that I thought was cool. I don't remember. Okay, so go ahead.
Well, my point is that let's say I grant you that he is a sovereign being and that he has granted and entered into a covenant with us, the people, that he will not break that. Him being
right.
God, he could break that anytime he wanted to. Just because he said he won't break it does not mean that he won't or hasn't. I mean, let's grant you that there is a God, and let's grant you that it is the Christian God, and I'll grant you that he gave us free will. How do we know that he has not, in any case, broken that free will?
Okay, actually, 2 points on that.
I want to say something real quick on the free will. I do think that God sometimes steps in and sometimes makes himself known to us in ways that might change the way that we're living our lives or the way that we're doing something. And he's done that to me personally. And so I know that the free will does have, there is a certain part there where God does step in. So I do want to say that can happen. That's completely possible.
Now, when God steps in, is that a suspension of natural laws, or is that an extension of natural laws by which we do not know the mechanism?
A suspension of natural laws or an extension? Well, I guess it depends on exactly which way he steps in. So you'd have to wonder exactly what happened and how he steps in. So if he steps in a way that seems supernatural and it goes beyond anything that we can explain with our physical laws, then he's not. Then he's basically extending him, if you want to say, with supernatural.
But how would we know which way he's going then? If these laws are already out there where he can manipulate them at will, that literally is a suspension of the uniformity of nature. If he tomorrow can change the gravitational constant, if he has the ability to do that, we have no predictive ability at that point. We can't say, hey, right, tomorrow we can put a satellite up. We have no idea. God can change it.
That's true. Well,
okay, so the same thing with apply that to free will. Well, I think what Kyle was saying is if God is only allowing you to have free will for the intermediate time, then there's no freedom actually there. It's illusionary.
No, it's totally a freedom given. It's like you give your kid the car keys, and you can take the car keys away at any time. He still gets to use the car. I mean, right. you say, here's a room that you can play in, but I may come in any time and kick you out of the room. You're still free to walk around in the room.
Greg, we agree.
With with parameters and stipulations.
And
I'm not sure how are you describing free will then? Because if the way I said free will without outside influence, you are being parameterized by the parents saying you have this limitation. You don't have freedom of undue influence.
Okay, well, outside influence. I didn't say that God wasn't going to try to influence your behavior. I don't know if that's what Stephanie was saying, because he will. He will
Yes,
send,
he
for
will.
example, he will send really brilliant Twitter evangelists who may try to influence you, try
Many
to get
have
you to see the light.
tried.
Well played, sir. Well played.
I had Ken
It
Hovind for
wasn't
3 years
bad. It
try.
wasn't. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible.
I like it, Craig. I like it. That's good.
An
So,
example,
well,
example
maybe
of
you should
a,
define
like
what.
He'll send attractive. He'll send attractive Twitter evangelists. How about that?
Hold on, Greg. An example of in your example with the rooms and the parents, that would be a parent taking you to a house and leaving. That's when you have free will. It's not putting you in a room and saying you can play in this room and do whatever you want to do in this room. It would be taking you to the house and then vanishing, and you wouldn't see that parent again.
Well, no. I mean, there are parameters to life. Period. You don't have free will. Isn't freedom of anything possible. It's not like you get to do whatever you want. You can't violate the laws of physics as a human being, can you? No.
That's not what
I mean, you can't violate. I know, but use the analogy for what you're talking about. If God use it for you as a person, you have been given a life. There are limits on your behaviors that have to do with the physical being of being a human being. Limits on your behaviors. That doesn't mean you aren't free. You want to go home at night and you want to light a spliff and play whatever music you want or do. There are limits to how much freedom you have. But that's not necessarily because, God will stop you from doing it.
But could he change my music that I'm listening to that particular night if he wanted to?
Well, God could use his sovereign ability to override, period, which means you start to do something that displeases God. He could literally just stop you. Boom. You can't move on.
That is not
right, but he hasn't done it. He hasn't done it. Hence, we have an Adolf Hitler, and God didn't say, you die before you do your terrible deeds.
That kind of makes it even worse. So he has the ability to step in, but then he doesn't.
Yeah.
That kind of sounds
because
worse,
you can't
though.
violate
Wait, hang on. Okay. And I hate to use the old atheist experience Tracy Harris type thing, but I don't like tropes, but it's a good argument. Look at it. If God has the ability to step in and doesn't, how is that making him not a moral monster? Because if I could prevent one child from being raped, if I could prevent one person from being killed, is it not a greater, maximally better being than somebody who doesn't step in?
According to Tracy Harris and her limited perception of how life is, sure. But according to a sovereign God who you've learned to trust because you've seen the beautiful world that he is trying to create and you are trying to help him create it, no. Yes, there are evil.
So you're arguing that one more evil in the world is better than the maximally best conditions we have now.
I'm arguing that God knows what we don't. And perhaps human freedom, to have the type of freedom that we are saying, we are sort of dancing around the fact that we know sort of exists because there is such a thing as moral evil that people are free to commit at will, and God doesn't stop them because he has made a covenant with himself, a law he will not violate in his own nature. I don't know if that quite made sense. It's good.
How do you reconcile the fact that that by your own admission he does have the ability to step in, and when something like what happened back in the 1940s happens, he doesn't? How God reconciles it?
It's not a simple question. It's not a simple answer. I
think it is. I think it's a very simple answer.
No, it's not. You can think it is. That doesn't make it.
Please enlighten me. Tell me how.
Do you think that this is the best of all possible worlds from a modal ontological reality?
That is potentially the answer. I believe that was Leibniz who originally started talking about that, and it was trash to high hell.
I'm not asking you if you agree with Leibniz's ontological argument. I'm saying, do you think that this is the best of all modal ontological realities?
That's entirely possible. I don't know for a fact, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility, given the moral condition of the human heart and given the fact that we have been given moral freedom. Maybe this is the absolute best possible world that could be built with those two preconditions.
Okay,
you have moral freedom and you are morally repugnant. And that is why you reject God.
So maybe the worst possible world too, right?
Hold on.
So wait, hang on one second. I promise.
We move on.
I just want to ask one quick question.
Steve, listen, I don't want to get lost in where we're going. I just wanted to answer a simple question, and then it's fair game. How do you personally justify that? You said it was not. You started by saying it's not a simple answer. So give me a complicated one. Just help me understand how you could justify that.
Justify which? You want me to justify for you the Holocaust? Is that what you're saying?
No.
What do I justify?
No.
Life itself? That's easy. The evil in the world? That's hard.
Okay.
Which?
I want you to justify how you could follow a deity that would sit back, arms folded, while that took place.
Because deep in my heart, I know, or I suspect. I don't know for a fact, but I totally suspect, given the evidence that God has given me of his character and his being, that that was the right thing to do. As crazy as that may sound to you, that was the absolute right thing to do. Moral perfection, inaction, human freedom with the ugliness of the human heart makes a world that God isn't responsible for, even though he was sovereign over it. He oversaw the thing the whole time, but it wasn't his will. That is why we pray as a Christian, thy will be done, thy will, because this world is not his will. It's our will.
How does that sit with you?
Makes some sense.
When you say that? What? When you say
how does that what?
How does that sit with you?
How does that what?
How does it sit with you? Like, the fact that you can say that, out in space and with words, like, how can you form that sentence to make sense? Like,
it
to
made sense to me.
I would never
I don't understand your question.
I would never be able to justify.
I thought I just did, but, whatever.
Well, I mean, you attempted to, but it doesn't make...
Tell me where I was wrong.
You were wrong in the fact that you said that these people all died ultimately because his moral character was such that it was the right thing to do.
No, I didn't. You misinterpreted. You misinterpreted slightly, but
please clarify.
The right thing to do in creating a world, and you're going to populate that world with beings. Those beings are going to be independent from you. The right thing to do. I'm just saying this is probably true. I don't know. I'm not God. Remember that. Probably. Yes. Please try. It'll be hard. The right thing to probably do if you are creating a world of beings that are independent of you is to allow them the moral freedom, even the moral freedom to be completely and utterly evil. And there is a redemptive purpose to the entire thing. Now, that purpose is mysterious, and I'm not saying it's necessarily easy to reconcile. That's why I say it's a complicated question. It's one that will keep you up at night. Why is the world so evil? But it's not, why is God so evil? Why are humans so evil is the better question. How could they do that to another human being? If you're talking about the Holocaust, you read that and go, see what they did there and go, how could a human being do that to another human being? What is wrong with us? What is wrong with human beings? And then you start looking at the theology of the Bible and it starts making a lot more sense. There's something deeply, deeply flawed and troubling about human nature. Not like we smoke and drink and cuss, because that's ridiculous. But we have committed genocide, and it's not according to God's will. It completely violates the spirit of the New Testament. Completely violates the spirit of the Bible. I mean, you might take issue with that, but it does.
You said New Testament. You're accurate there. Because when you said it violates the character of God, it doesn't, because he himself was a genocide, war-breathing entity himself back in the Old Testament. He wiped out the entire planet with the flood.
Kyle, let me piggyback on something on your free will topic and on this idea of evil. I just want to make a couple of points. One is with evil. One of the things is for us to truly be able to develop and understand the greatness of passion and love and empathy and all of those different beautiful aspects of people's lives. Seeing the opposite sometimes, seeing people who are apathetic and people who lie and people who don't do the right things and people who are evil actually can help us build these other traits, because we've seen and overcome these other traits. And so that's one purpose. But also to speak to your idea of free will, think about Paul and exactly what Paul's experience was. So he was walking on the road to Damascus as Saul. He was cursing at Christians. He was planning to go murder Christians. He had a hand in some of the earlier murders. He was there at Stephen's stoning. And yet Jesus came down. Clearly, Paul did not have free will. Instead, Paul was blinded for a few days. He was fasting for a few days. And then he came out and he became a person who was so brave that he spent decades then preaching in favor of Jesus, writing at least 6 books of the New Testament. Testament, if not up to, I think, 11. So Paul's free will was interrupted in a way, but it changed him for the better. So I think it can happen where God steps in. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on Paul and why would he do what he did?
Well, I mean, just to be completely honest, first of all, I don't necessarily believe the story that happened, but let's say that I did.
Really?
Right. I mean, I don't.
I don't know. You're the atheist, so I didn't think you were going to. But okay,
yeah.
Go ahead.
But if I were to try to pull a reason out, I mean, it could be all kind of things. He could have been on the road to Damascus and had a seizure and came out. There are stories of people who have completely different personalities when they come out of stuff like that. It could be that he had one of those and it changed, how he thought when he came through with it, and miraculously he started loving Christians again. I think it's kind of horrid almost that God would take somebody that for years slaughtered so many Christians and then wake him up and have him become the leader of that movement. I think there's just a kind of like a sick irony there. It doesn't sit well with me that would happen. So I don't believe it, number one. But if it did happen and I had to make a judgment call for it, I would say it was something chemically in the brain. He had a seizure or fell out and hit his head and woke up a lot better person than he fell down as.
Do you think that would drive him to preach for decades, to be imprisoned, to be jailed, to do all this kind of stuff? A seizure on the road?
Well, how many people that go to jail and come out are evangelicals, and they go and they travel the world preaching the gospel. Big events happen in people's life that make them have a sudden shift in their behavior. No matter what it is, traumatic events cause people to seek things, and when they find something that they latch onto, they're passionate about it, and they continue to go forward. So, yeah, I think it's perfectly plausible that something happened to him, whether it be biologic or something in his head, and he found something that he latched onto and went with it. You see that all the time now. I mean, that's not a far out there concept.
I don't think we do see that all the time now, as far as somebody who's preaching for decades and ends up being beheaded for everything that he believes. But unless God did intervene in this case, and maybe God does intervene today too in some people's cases, and maybe God intervenes when people are in jails. The nice thing about Paul, and the thing that I think that you might want to hang a hat on, is the fact that Paul gives us a very strong message that even some of the worst people at one point can be rehabilitated. And so even some of the listeners here who might think to themselves, man, I've got a lot of skeletons in that closet, but look what Paul was like. And I know I'm not even close to that. So that gives you a pretty good hope that if a guy like Paul can make it to heaven, anyone who just comes to develop a nice relationship with Jesus Christ, in my opinion, John 3:16 pretty much rules.
Well, let's go with that then. Let's go with that. I think that's a good point. So let me ask you this question. I spend the rest of my life living a relatively good life. I just make it a point to state that I don't believe a God exists, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have another guy who has spent several years raping and a couple murders. He gets put away. He goes to prison, and he finds Jesus in prison. So when we're both standing before St. Peter and they're reading off the things that we've done in life, and my hiccup is that I just didn't believe that the big man existed. But his is a laundry list of murders and rapes and all of that. Which one of us is going to get to go to heaven, and which one of us is going to get sent to hell?
Craig, you want to pick that one up?
It really depends on the circumstances of...
It always depends on the circumstances. This is something.
Well, no, because the one thing with this, it's not a simple question. It's an atheist stacking the deck to make it all look like God is unjust, and because I've created the perfect unjust thing. Obviously, we've talked about obviously, we've been talking about a sovereign God. A sovereign God also would be all-knowing, which means he would know. You, the atheist, let's say, that you're saying you're just inventing this atheist that's perfect, except he's an atheist. And he's a really good guy, but he's me. And you're inventing a murderer who, this murderer had no moral good in him whatsoever, but for some reason he found the Lord at the end of his life. Life doesn't work like that. It's a very complicated mix of motivations. And God is going to understand even the motivations of a diehard atheist. Just with my own experience with atheists, there are some who are legitimately honest seekers of the truth, who are like decent people who just, really, really are convinced that there isn't a God. And there are some that are liar, liar, pants on fires. God knows the difference.
Will those atheists go to heaven?
I don't think that it's a zero-sum game. I think that God in his sovereignty is going to give. Yeah, but according to the book, also a guy, Paul, was on his way to murder Christians. God in his sovereign wisdom intervened supernaturally. I would assume you sound like what? Your Texas accent, Texas somewhat. I would assume before you die, God is going to supernaturally.
North Carolina, but close enough. It's in the South.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wherever
that's
I have
pretty.
NASCAR wife beaters and Dale Earnhardt hats, that's where.
Do you NASCAR? You don't. Do you NASCAR?
No, I don't.
Okay. I was going to say. I wasn't sure if I was going to be impressed or I was going to be like, really? I don't know. I was going to be kind of impressed. Okay, so wait, you didn't make the atheist a wife beater, did you? No, you didn't.
Let's do that.
Okay, so the atheist
why not?
Hey, if he's beating his wife, is she a jerk, or is she a cool wife and he's beating her because he's a monster, or maybe she's a terrible wife and he's beating her because he's righteous and just? No,
a guy
in
a wife beater is more justified to be sent to hell than the simple fact of disbelief, if you want to be honest.
Obviously, but the moral decision-making process that you are bringing to the table, obviously God would be using some of the same moral ideas that you have. You're not out moraling God just because you've invented boxes that he's going to do this according to theology. It doesn't work like that. Paul was killing Christians. That's the worst thing you could probably be doing at the time. And God just stepped in and said, here I am. I'm here for you. Now, let's say, who's the worst most atheist that ever atheisted? Who's that? Christopher Hitchens? Maybe God said, I'm here. Do you want to serve me now? Right before he died? The thief on the cross was given the opportunity right before he died. And he said, I tell you the truth, this day you will be with me in paradise. Just given the opportunity.
Doing a lot of around to not answer my simple question. Which one of the two?
I thought I did.
According to the book, will go to hell.
According to the book, the non-believer.
According to the book, God is going to make the right decision based on the moral condition
of the heart.
Thank you
for being able to actually say it. I know it sticks in the throat to say it. I mean, you actually, Greg, you're doing what a normal. It's what I told SJ earlier. You're being a normal human being because it's not okay and it doesn't feel right to sit across from somebody that even you just met and say, because you don't believe, you're going to go to hell. It doesn't feel right because it's not right.
Right. But that does, just because the theology may imply that, there is more to the theology. If you're a normal human being and you look at the scriptures with, some amount of, if you're really dogmatic about it, yeah. But I don't happen to interpret things in a way that's really hardcore. Does that make sense? Because that's false as far as I'm concerned.
You don't get to make that call, is what I'm ultimately saying. Like,
no, of course I don't.
Of course I don't. If you go by the Bible and you think that's the infallible word of God, then it's very clear. That's the one thing that's actually crystal clear on. The fact that you don't believe, you will go to hell. So is that a just punishment?
No, it's not crystal clear. It's not crystal clear. If you go to Romans, the implication is the wrath of God is being revealed against all unbelievers who cover up the truth in unrighteousness. A little later on in the Bible, Paul says, I was shown mercy because I acted in ignorance. Now, that's two different types of people. That's one person who knows what he's doing and covers it up in unrighteousness, and another person who's just ignorant, doesn't know any better. God will know the difference. I might not. That's two different types of people. Two morally completely different. A good human being can get lost in an evil world and become a terrible.
When you get your thought out, I'm not trying to cut you off. I don't want to.
No, go ahead. You can cut me off. Go ahead. I tend to be long-winded. You can cut me off.
You make a point that everybody's going to be held to a different standard based on the works of their life, and I thought that was
to whom much is given, much is required. That's scriptural. I make a point that's from the same Bible. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. But you do realize that that is in direct conflict with the majority of what Christianity preaches, right?
The majority of the Christians may be preaching something that is not quite really well thought out theologically. Sure. Yes, I've tried to explain that to other atheists, and I get slammed. Well, why are you the Christian and they're the wrong Christian? Why, But yeah, obviously I'm in big conflict when I open my mouth with a lot of standard Christian doctrine. I got no real issue.
That's not slander. They're not cutting you. They're asking you a legitimate question. What gives you the right to say what is and what isn't in Christianity?
Don't know. Yeah. You're asking me a question, and nothing really. You're asking me the question. I'm answering to the best of my ability. So, and I'm using some of my human reasoning, and I mix it with some of my interpretation. I'm pretty hardcore in terms of being a biblical Christian. Don't get me wrong. I find myself to be actually a lot more obedient than most of the Christians you meet. A lot more obedient. I find them really, really, really sloppy, but they're sloppy with their own internal Christianity, and they're really good at pointing the finger at everybody out there. I try to do the opposite.
About you.
I'm hardcore with myself.
Right? And who would be right? If they said the same thing about you, which of the two of you, and how would you determine which of the two of you is correct in that situation?
I don't know. I think I would be right. I think that mine is the more reasonable position, but
Of course you do. I mean, of course you do. That's human nature. You want to feel like you're right, but how do you know? Like, you have to be able to prove that somehow. You can't just say,
Wait. That's the atheist thing where I'm supposed to be on here proving to you stuff. I don't know you, not you personally, but I don't know you, Jack. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I'm living my own life.
Understood. But you do realize that you entered a conversation about this particular, like, I didn't drag you in here. You came in here.
No, I know. I'm just saying.
Your own free will.
I know.
Hey, guys, I got to let me just make a quick comment.
Sure.
I only have about 5 more minutes. My neighbors just came over here. For some strange reason, it's a Thursday night, but I can hear them downstairs. So I only have about 5 more minutes. I just want to note that.
Well, then let's go to you, and then you get the last, your thoughts, and let's make sure that you get everything that you want to say out, and then we can pick up where we left off.
Go for it.
So go ahead. The floor is yours, SJ.
Well, let me very first thank both of you. I think you guys have been incredible hosts. I will recommend that all of my theist friends come on your show if you're willing to have.
Definitely, best ones we've been on.
Yeah, you're really polite. You're nice. You let us say what we want to say. You listen. I've got only good things to say about you. So I really want to thank.
I just wish you had more time. Amen. I didn't have to go. I'm kind of disappointed now. You make me sad.
Come on the coffee talk.
Oh, I'll go anywhere. Oh, anywhere I'm invited 9 times out of 10, I'll go.
Oh, okay, yeah. We'll bring you back in. Maybe you can come on my channel if you want, or I'll come back on yours. We can do this again.
I squealed. Absolutely. No, that's cool. No, you're awesome. You're a good guest.
Yeah.
No, these guys rock. These guys are great.
It's important
this is actually fun.
In a way that's, because you feel differently than I do. I don't disregard you as any less or dislike you because of that fact. I think that.
But that's clear in your behavior. A lot of atheists will say that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But you don't grow unless you are actually willing to hear the other person out and then challenge each other. But I don't want it to be a one-on-one conversation where.
Why do I like Jerry Lewis in my head? Somebody said "nice lady." It's like, you're a nice lady. Jerry Lewis.
You just have to. You have to be a point sometimes where everybody's different, and I think that's a good thing in life. I think the fact that everybody sees things differently is what has got us here in the pinnacle of history, where we're doing things that were just dreams at one point. You don't get there unless you have somebody challenging the way that it's done. If everybody just went the same route, you would just be stagnant, and it wouldn't be life wouldn't be as beautiful as it is.
Amen. Amen.
Although we don't agree.
Preach it. Preach it, dude.
Now remember, we still have tweet Thursday to get to.
Oh yeah. Well, I just wanted to give SJ the opportunity to tell everybody bye. SJ, go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you and your Christian Apologetics website, and you can plug all that. So go ahead.
Okay, great. So I'm at christian-apologist.com. I've written 56 blogs, and they're on all different aspects of Christianity. And I'd love it if you came to visit. Thank you so much. You can also find me on Twitter at LEAD, lead 1225, and 1225 is for Christmas.
Awesome. Good. I didn't know that. Very, very cool. Well, SJ, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back anytime.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Thank you. Nice seeing you, Craig. Thanks for coming on too.
Thanks, SJ.
Yeah, this is awesome. I'm glad I did, actually.
Okay. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
So where were we in your horrible God again?
He was smiting the non-believers and destroying the world in a flood. And
That's right.
you're mouthing off to him like, you got some, you mouth it up. It's
So-
your. Anyways, go ahead.
We were talking about hell. So let me just ask you.
We were?
Let's
Oh,
single
yes,
it
we
out.
were.
Let's not have it against two people anymore. Let's just take me, for example. I, for 25 years, was a Bible-believing Christian. I was in church Sundays and Wednesdays, youth groups, all that. I lived it. I had those experiences, or what I thought was experiences at the time, and I've been there, and I know exactly where you're coming from. So this is not I've been an atheist all my life.
Okay.
I got to a point where I started questioning things. Things didn't make sense. You couldn't justify some things in the Bible, and I couldn't turn away from the discrimination that it just systematically just sprays everywhere, all through history. I mean, just there's situations in every society where the book is used to be a dividing point, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So if I live the rest of my life this way, and not counting things where I drink and smoke a bowl every now and then and all that stuff.
You smoke a bowl?
I do. It's how I'm able to do these live streams.
It's how you're able to get through these Twitter, what are these, YouTube conversations? All right.
So
okay, go ahead.
So if I live my life that way, and the rest of my life is spent having these kind of conversations with individuals, although my mission is to kind of show where the contradictions are, is it justifiable that I burn for eternity?
It doesn't seem it. No, it doesn't seem it. But when I first became a Christian,
you're a different kind of Christian. Then you are a different kind of Christian.
I take that as a compliment. I consider myself I've heard that from a lot of different people, and I consider that a compliment. But I was, I didn't become a Christian until I was 30. And the idea, one of the first things that happened when me and my friend became Christians is we would talk about that a lot. Like, how is that ever justified? Even Adolf Hitler, how could you possibly justify sending someone to a lake of fire forever and ever and ever and ever? What could you possibly do that would be worth eternal torment? And we could never wrap our brains around it. And it used to really bother me for the first 2 or 3 years when I was a Christian. I used to really struggle with it a lot. I let it go. Honest to God, you might say, oh, this is a cop-out, but it's not. Bible says, trust the Lord with all your heart and cling not to your own understanding. I don't necessarily think that armies of people are going to be burning forever, and that's the whole point of this. I think the purpose of Christianity is redemptive. I don't think it's been practiced correctly. I don't think the way it's been practiced has led to, a Christ-like world where people are really loving and merciful and Christian. But I think if it were given a real opportunity to be practiced the way, I'm sure you've heard somebody say this, the way I think it should be, to be embodied the way I think it would be most successful, that it's a much more positive and warm-hearted and loving and decent religion than its bad practitioners would have you believe. I don't know if that answered the question, though. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I see that, you say that you get called, I forget the term you just used, but that you get, people give you a hard time for making that kind of stance. Whereas I don't, because I think it's natural. I think that if you have any kind of empathy and you are not a psychopath or a sociopath, you find no pleasure in the fact that a group of people can be tortured for eternity just because they choose not to believe in a...
Right. I think the Christians who get off on that aren't really thinking it through. They're just being, they're like, you're busting you're busting their chops and giving them a hard time. And they'll say, like, you're going to be, they're kind of gleeful about it in the moment, but they aren't really thinking it through as you, the human being, is still, like, put it this way. If you move that conversation outside and all of a sudden somebody lit you on fire, that person in front of you who was saying he'd be happy to see you burn forever would be freaking out. And he'd be like, oh my God, are you okay? Oh my God. They're just not putting. They're not putting their human dimension to it.
I've got to ask, for the Christians that are out there that do revel in the thought, people burning them, they'll actually say, "I'm going to be absolutely, besides myself, looking down from heaven as God, torments you for eternity."
That's pretty
I don't find that to be very
psychopathic.
Christ-like. Matter of fact, I find it to be rather psychotic.
It's totally insane. It's insane.
But that's I see not frequently, but I do see it.
Yeah,
probably, but that's the heat of the moment. Or it's not necessarily a deeply. Maybe I won't justify it. Never mind. It's totally stupid.
But if you knew, and let's just take the Bible literally how it's written, because that's what the majority thinks. Just take a step outside of your view right now.
Okay.
Let's say that is the way that it is. That if you do not believe that is the punishment for that is eternal damnation and burning for eternity, would that still be a God you would want to love and serve? No, right? No.
It's hard to see how that could ever be right. But wait a minute. Wait. If we're going to be speculating theologically, one thing that you do that I got to say I love is that you actually understand that if we're speculating theologically, you have to ask the questions as if the God is real when we're talking about theological questions. Sure. A lot of atheists don't do that. Basic common sense, as far as I'm concerned, you've done it a lot. You put yourself in the shoe. Okay, God is. We're talking about a theological question. We have to talk about it as if God is real.
Well, I've been there. I know the struggle. I'm just taking it from my own personal account. Probably
right, but okay. Yeah. If in the most hardcore interpretation of the Bible is true, and really hardcore, a lot of people go to hell. And
don't you mean the most literal? Don't you mean the most literal translation of the Bible?
No, because there are literal scriptures. There are literal scriptures that justify universalism. That didn't come out of thin air. It came out of the Bible.
Read me.
It did.
Well, that's true. There are universalists out there that hold to that.
God has given all men over to disobedience, so He may have mercy on them all.
Are you a universalist?
No, but I'm just saying it's in the Bible.
What?
Okay, well, I mean, I actually like universalism, right? I mean,
I like it. Let me qualify that. I'm a universalist in that I hope universalism is true. I can live with the fact that Adolf Hitler gets off the hook if everybody else does too, but I would never practice universalism and start preaching it because that's actually kind of ruinous if it's not true. I hope. I
can get behind that. I don't think that's a abhorrent position to take. I mean, there are people that I've actually asked, do you think universalism is true? And they're like, no. And we're like, well, what happens if it was? Well, that'd make God a liar. And I'm like, wow, so you really wouldn't like everybody to be saved? That's really Christ-like. I'm telling you, these are some arguments that I've actually had that people have actually told me.
I believe you. I'm dismayed by the moral condition of my fellow Christians. I believe you. I know what idiots they can be. I'm 100% on board with, calling them as they are. Yeah, they're not
so tired though. Like the work that you have to do to justify a decent God is almost outstanding. I mean, like it makes me tired trying to follow the steps that you have to go through to create something that is worshipable. You know what I mean? Because as we lay it out, as the Bible stands in the black and white ink, you can't do that. Like you can't justifiably say, yes, I would still worship that God. But and that's where I think that's what it started for me anyway. The whole, I'm doing so much work to try to justify a being that should just either be good or he's not. And if he's good, then I don't have a problem worshiping him. And if he does shady shit, or he kills the entire planet and leaves one 900-year-old man in charge of 2 of every kind, including dinosaurs, on a wooden boat for 40 days and 40 nights of rain because of a talking snake that happened in the Garden of Eden that told a lady that was made from the man's rib, who was made from dust, that because of the original sin. I mean, you just see the loops that you have to go through to sell this. I mean, it's just outstanding. How are you just not asleep at the wheel all the time, man. I mean, it's got to be just bone tired for you.
The God that exists, the one thing that you haven't actually seen or put your finger on is that there's entirely a possibility that the God that exists is pure good. And you yourself, in your limited understanding of what constitutes good, can't know it, can't know him. You can only know him the way he has laid out the steps for you to perceive him. You can't just, because so in order for you to connect, you personally, you would have to actually get a glimmer of what this person's talking about is actually real. This being actually exists. I don't understand him, but I'm going to not necessarily, that's why I said the scripture, trust the Lord with all your heart, cling not to your own understanding. The carnal mind is enmity against God. That's also the rational, you're being very, very philosophical, and you're warring against an understanding of God as life itself, the author of life itself.
Let's say
he's got to be good.
Let me
ask you this.
Let me ask you this.
I don't know if that made sense, but I tried.
Well, not really, but we're gonna try to pick it apart here. You said that you trust the Lord with all of your heart, right?
Right. True.
But can you really say that after we just had the conversation of, well, if he is this way, then I couldn't be okay with worshiping that?
Because
hold on, Greg, hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
Because that is one area where these hardcore, deplorable Christians come in, where they are fanatic about the fact that, yes, if you do not disbelieve, you will burn hell, and you are justified to do so. Now, that's trusting in what he says with all of your heart and in 100%. In my opinion,
there's a scripture that nullifies that behavior, that very behavior. The letter kills, but the spirit gives life. You're supposed to be led of the Spirit of God. Perhaps there are contradictions in the Bible. I'm not here to
It was a joke, Greg. It was just a joke.
That's fine. Okay.
Relax. Maybe you should be smoking something.
No, I haven't done that in a long time, my friend. Long time.
We all know you still smoke. It's not a big deal. We won't judge you.
Good. Thank you. It's legal in California,
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing in South Carolina, sitting on North Carolina.
After all,
sitting on their tar heels, tipping cows. You should be legalizing marijuana. I don't know. Anyways, go ahead.
Listen, we'll be the last. Frankie's nodding his head emphatically. Yes, we will be the last state to. My brother actually lives in L.A. and.
Does he really?
Yeah. Anytime I go visit him, he has like the medicine containers full of just different kinds. It's just a different world, When you go out there,
totally.
Here where it's all you smoke pot, you're the worst person ever. Everybody that's evil smokes pot over here. Then you go over there and it's people walking down the road like it's. I had to literally be dragged back here to.
Well, I mean that's a big part of how that's a big part of the difference between me and I wasn't raised in Bible land. I was raised in Westchester County, right outside New York City, in the most secular left-wing town in the world, basically like Berkeley, So and I wasn't a Christian until 30. What's that?
What made you start to believe?
I had a powerful experience with the Holy Spirit of God. I went to church one night. My wife convinced me to go see this kind of prophet guy, and I wanted to get out of work, so I was like, yeah, whatever, what the hell, I'll check it out. And he just started speaking to me. He was like, you've been in a war your whole life. And it just, wow, just floored me. I started crying right then and there. And it was really real. It was very real to me that night. So much so that my life since then has done a complete 360. Now, almost all of it positive. People who know me from my past don't know I'm a Christian. They would be really surprised if I told them, because I don't preach. I preach it on Twitter a little, but I don't get in their face about it. And they haven't noticed any change in my personality, except that I've completely cleaned up my life and, don't do anything destructive anymore. Because
if you have to have a brand of Christianity, I'll just be perfectly honest with you.
You'll take mine, right?
Right, because my whole problem with Christianity in general, and not to get in a diatribe about myself, but I grew up as a gay guy in the South.
Okay.
So,
yeah, that'll be a problem right there with church. Forget it. I mean,
well, on top of that, I went to a independent Baptist church, which is far right of Southern Baptists, which is already far right. So if Southern Baptists aren't too extreme or aren't extreme enough for you, then independent Baptist is where it's at. But it was a constant barrage of abomination, and I just remember hearing that word over and over again, and it just getting drilled in my head that lying with another man makes you an abomination. And so
right, I can totally understand why you would walk away. Go ahead. Sorry.
Important. I think this is important because what happened with me is that I had to wake up every day being somebody else. I was not me. I was doing things to create what I thought would make the creator that made me happy. So it wasn't about what I could do during the day to be happy. It was that something was wrong with me and that I needed to fix it. That I wasn't good enough, and maybe if I hung around girls more or dated one. I was engaged to a girl for 3 years, and thankfully that fell through because I would be pretty stuck right now. But that made me be in a situation where I was just miserable for this entire period of time. And it's because of a book that was written however many years ago that just its entire purpose is to divide you against somebody who is different than you are. And thankfully for me, one day I woke up and said, you know what? I want to be who I am for a change. I want to actually feel like Kyle for once and not try to please some big man in the sky that doesn't think I'm good enough. And my point for doing shows like this and this entire channel is to lay that out for people, because there are people out there, maybe somebody that's watching now that is going through that same thing. They're stuck in a southern state where it's there's just no one around like you. It's not like a big city where you can flock to people and you're alone. And to be alone and then to be told that you're not good enough, and to be alone and told that you're an abomination, and to be alone and be told that you're going to burn fraternity because of who you love, is the sickest, most disgusting thing that exists on this planet. And if I can do anything, even hitting one person, to give them kind of a fire within them, if they're thinking, maybe I need to change, it's not you who needs to change. You are perfect exactly the way that you are. And you need to let everyone else know that. And it's hard because some people aren't going to accept you. But do it. Don't let them win. And this guy's, Greg, you're different because I don't think that you adhere to that. But to the ones that are in that firebrand.
Well, can I tell you what I think what the issue really there is? Because I grew up totally differently, especially with gay people. I was a theater major in college. So I've known hundreds of gay people everywhere I've gone. And I hung out in Manhattan all the time, the Village. So what you are talking about, I don't doubt that was really, really, really hard for you. And I totally get it on the level of, yeah, you're trying to be something you're not, and you're trying to fit into a box that you just don't fit into. But I think that I take that as more cultural. I mean, I'm reading the same Bible, dude. And you feel no harshness or judgment from me, I'm assuming. It's not in the Bible. It's in the culture of those towns, where there's like one gay guy in the middle of town, and he's kind of queened out, and that's the only gay people know. So it's weird to their worldview. And they use the scripture I'm sure they use it to hate on the gay person. But it's not the teachings of Jesus that are creating that. That's cultural. That's human nature. Human beings do that with the different people. Like, the reason why I have no issue with it at all is because when you're in an acting class, you're like one of two straight men in the class. So like most of the people I hung out with in acting classes were gay, and it totally removes all your stereotypes. You don't think of gay people in any certain way because you meet all different types. I think that's a cultural thing more than it is a Bible or a Christian thing. Yes, I understand how you perceive it as completely one and the same, because to you growing up it was the same. But I'm trying I'm trying to bring something different to the table. Where
I understand that, and I applaud you for the effort. But the people that are doing that, it may be culturally. I'm not in any way, going to try to say that it's one thing or the other. I think it's a systematic blend of a lot of different things.
It's complicated. I'll give you that.
But
yes, complicated.
This is one I will grant you is complicated. Yes, but they get that from that same book. They pray to that same deity. The
same book says, "Judge not, lest ye shall be judged." I have no opportunity to judge you, but whether you are gay or straight, that's between you and God. That is not between me, you, and God. The same book tells me not to judge at all.
But is the fact that you're straight between you and God, is that something that you're going to have to take up with God one day?
What do you mean? I don't know.
You said the fact that you're gay is something that you'll have to take up with God one day. Is that same thing go the other way? Do you have to be accountable for?
I'll be accountable for all the deeds done in the body that I did.
My point. That's my point.
Be they good or evil.
Is it a deed to love somebody of the same sex? Is that something?
I don't know. I have no idea. You are going into an area that I am not authorized to speak about. I'm not gay. A beautiful wife. I'm not even close. but I have no.
From the obvious jokes that I could have went there because I actually kind of like you. So my point is this: it's the fact
I like you too. Actually, this is a good conversation as far as I'm concerned. It could get even better. I really hope you guys have me back on the show because this could get way better.
But it's the fact that you don't know that. I think is the pivotal issue. Should it be a question whether or not, because you love somebody of the same sex, should that even be an issue? Should that be a contention of anything?
Okay, but you're mishearing. Okay, let me stop you because you're mishearing me. I'm not speaking correctly. I don't care. I have friends who are gay who told me they're gay, and I have forgotten that they told me they were gay because I just don't care. It's like you telling me you prefer eggplant. I'll be like, dude, I'm just not feeling it. I don't like it, but I don't care.
Congratulations, you are a human being and you have empathy. But I'm talking about the faith that you are a part of, because you know as well as I do that's not the majority position. The majority,
right? But I'm not necessarily convinced. I don't necessarily care about the majority position. What I care about is what is the right approach theologically. Now, I know the right approach for me, because I'm not gay. I would love to have someone who is committed to, I would love to find somebody who could to try and reconcile it as, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to, it gets complicated. I don't know how to reconcile that. Does that make sense?
I understand where you're coming from in the fact that it's hard to kind of, land one way or the other because you really can't. You're in a tough bind where it says one thing and you see it as another thing. And I commend you for the stance that you take on it. But my ultimate point is that I could not be okay with living for eternity in the same place where there are people that use that same book to tear people's lives apart because they were different. You see what I mean?
Yeah, but in the Jesus trial in the wilderness, the devil starts using the scripture. Scripture can be misused. It's a tool. It can be used for evil purposes. It can be used to do harm. It can be used to sow destruction. Your words can have the power to heal or destroy. That's a choice of an individual person. What's that?
Are the people that believe that being gay, just for an example, is an abomination? Are those people less Christian?
It depends on their actions. It doesn't necessarily depend on their belief. If they follow the scripture that says judge not, and they're kind and loving to you, and they just go, I just wish he would not be gay, but I'm gonna cook them some eggs or something. Then no, they're cool. You must have met people like that who kind of have an issue with you being gay, but are like cool to you and decent to you, and you like them. I'm sure they exist in South Carolina or North Dakota, wherever. North Carolina, sorry.
Well, that's quite a geological difference there. that's throwing me on both ends of the map there.
Well, first I put you in Texas, and then I had to move you up the map, and then I don't know. I'll get you in California.
I don't want to harp on that. I think that that's a good place to stop on that, because I didn't bring that up to go into a long diatribe. I'm just using it as one example. That's just one of the countless things that you have to create an entire alternate interpretation of what this is. You have to go an entirely different route on that one issue. Now there's hundreds in the Bible, and I marvel at the fact that there are people like yourself who are willing to jump through all of those hoops instead of just saying, I'm not going to.
Well, I didn't have to jump through any hoops, dude. The only hoops, I'm on your show, so I don't mishear this. I'm willingly jumping through the hoops that you're laying out for me, but I didn't jump through those hoops with myself at all. I struggled with a couple of things.
Yeah,
a couple of things.
Yeah.
Right, but what's that? I know you're not putting me down. I'm just saying, for me, it wasn't. Some of the intellectual stuff that you throw out, that you're talking about, some of it is just philosophical musings and questions. Are they answerable in this life? Probably not. Some of the thing that you're talking about here, I'm trying to. I don't know. I think you know what I'm saying, right? I'm not really struggling a lot and jumping through a lot of intellectual hoops. The things that are intellectually challenging about reconciling different parts of the Bible, I just consider that kind of fun. It's philosophical, interesting questions. They don't challenge me on a personal level at all.
And Steve will back me up on this. I do not delve into the whole philosophy aspect of things. Steve is the philosophy intellectual guy. I'm telling you things that are questions that I had based on me being in your shoes and the kind of battle that I struggled with, because I'm very sensitive to the plight of people just because of the situation that I was in. So I have a kind of a deeper connection with people who are different and who have to face every day not only being different, but going through everyday life. And I think that anything that tries to make that harder for them is...
Well, but Christianity practiced correctly is supposed to be making things easier for people, and it's supposed to be healing. It's supposed to be helping people heal. I mean, the way it was practiced, how you were raised, it was probably mostly more toxic than not. I find with a lot of atheists who used to be Christians, the Christianity that they were raised in was ruinous to one degree or another, or toxic. So I have empathy for the things you talk about, because I understand, where you're coming from. That's kind of why I wanted to start doing this, because I thought I'd be able to.
To be fair, that was their interpretation of the Bible, and this is yours. I know. So I know. My ultimate, going back to the beginning, was, how do we prove which one of you is correct?
We shall know them by their fruits. When I get my fruits, you will see. You'll put me up against other people, and you see by the fruits. The fruits of my endeavors. I've just started my Christian.
What does that mean exactly? What does it by your fruits mean? Explain that to me. Like, what do you mean by that?
You shall to know them by their fruits means to judge them by the results. What occurs in their life? Do the things that they build in their life lead to, good, positive outcomes, or is it ruinous and destructive and toxic?
So ultimately, that halt that idea of hellfire and brimstone, life looks pretty good. I mean, it's no different than anyone else's. And when does the results come in? Like, how long do I have to wait before I can judge your fruits? Why can't I just tell you based on what you say and your actions that you do in everyday life?
Well, you can. I mean, you've heard me talk. You've already made a judgment about me, so.
Sure. And I think that at your core, you're decent, and that you are where I was, and that this fills a need somewhere, and you're pursuing that need. I think that if you take people who do preach the hellfire and brimstone, their life is probably no different than you or I's. It's not any worse. It's not any better. But they're probably
right. But the fruits in that particular situation would also mean how their message has affected the people in their congregation. Have they built positive results in the people's lives who are their flock, who are the pastors that I hear talked about by atheists, the former pastors, sowed destruction into their lives, sowed hate into their lives, sowed conflict into their lives, sowed self-hatred into their lives. That's a fruit. I don't know if you had pastors who were destructive to you. You haven't talked about that, but that would be a fruit. If you're a preacher and you have a bunch of hateful congregants, that's your fruit, and they're jerks, and they go around. If you're a preacher and you have a bunch of decent-hearted people who really mean well, and everyone might. I mean, one of the things I was hoping is that people would be like, I don't agree with him at all, but he's kind of cool. I don't dislike him. To me, that's successfully preached Christianity, where you don't get in the way, where you don't become the issue because you're such a tripped out jerk. And that's just not a lot of Christians that you see.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that I'm a pretty cool guy?
Yeah, you're totally. Actually, you and I would. What's that?
Then that's successful atheism by the same standard. You know what I mean? Like
I got no issue with how you practice atheism. You strike me as very honest, and the conversation that we had has been one of the best atheist Christian conversations that I've participated in. I got no qualms with you at all. At all. You've been cool. You're asking me questions. We're having a normal conversation. This has been really great from my point of view. This has been totally cool. So I have no issue with you whatsoever.
I agree. I don't have any issue with you either. Like it's not you that I have an issue with. Just like it's not me that you have an issue with. It's the idea.
Right.
And ultimately,
that's the whole point of the conversation. So we start trying to, we meet somewhere and we start discussing something, and hopefully we come to some understanding about each other. There are different types of atheists than you out there, and I've met them, and they're I have most of my friends on Twitter are atheists though, and they're all pretty cool.
I got a suggestion because we're all singing Kumbaya. I think we all agree. Look, there's some shit people out there, and I don't care whether they're the atheist or theist, right? I think that everybody seems to agree that the fire and brimstone of hell people that are condemning everybody and just nasty people should be called out just as much as the atheist with some of their vitriolic militant things that they do should be called out, right? Because I have no qualms either way. I'm agnostic, so hey, I have no dog in that fight. I see a shit argument, I'll get on it, right? And
or shitty behavior.
Or exactly. Oh, very good. I totally agree with that. I think that's even better. Shitty behavior, because I think that's far worse than just having a bad argument, right? So I think that as the NonSequitur show, as us and the people that watch this, I think that should be the biggest takeaway. Is that I'm not concerned about the mainstream person that has a belief that differs than mine. I thrive on that. I want to know people's beliefs.
Why they're on your show.
Exactly. It's the person that, like you said, it's the actions of certain people that I think should be universally condemned, no matter what your ideological position is.
100%. 100% on that. Yes, absolutely.
And to a certain extent, I would agree, and to a certain extent, I would disagree on that. Just only because anybody that can try to justify the kind of discrimination that, if you were, I'm not saying hell's, fire and brimstone, but in any shape or form, if you hold a belief that because either you believe or you don't believe, or the fact that you, let's say you're a stripper or whatever, if you look down on that person, and the reason that you do that is because you look to this book over here, I don't think that should be preached. I don't think that should be spread. I think that's a dangerous idea. So to a certain extent, I agree with you that, people should be allowed to have their ideas. But I do not support the spreading of anything that's detrimental to anybody's personal.
Well, of course, I don't agree with those positions either. I do think they have the right to say them, though.
Sure. Yeah. That we agree, but I wouldn't support that. I wouldn't be their cheerleader, is what I'm saying.
No, not at all.
But yeah, that was a great conversation, I think.
Awesome. Totally awesome. I'm really glad I came on, actually. That was probably the best one that I've had.
We would love to have you back. And we'll set that up for sure. And that way we can, maybe what we can do is, center around a more stabilized topic, because this was kind of like just an open dialogue. And I think if we kind of get to where we can hone in on one individual issue and
Yeah,
just
we can do that.
Dissect that, I think that would be a really beneficial show to do. Absolutely.
Sounds cool. Sounds cool. I'm totally in. I'm totally in.
Steve, before I tell everybody,
I'm on board with your godless project. It's with your version of godlessness. It works for me. It's totally fine.
That out of it. Make sure we get that recorded. Thea saying we were. Thank you for that. That's a glow. I'm just kidding. Greg. So Greg, I'm gonna let you, say your final thoughts, and then Steve, you jump in, and then I'll tell everybody what's going on for tomorrow and next week, and then Frankie can go drink some more beer.
Do it. All right. So thank you very much, my friends. Like I said, this was really, really, I thought this was my favorite conversation. I've only done about 6 or 7 of these YouTube chats. And the people who I've chatted with are friends of mine, actually, from Twitter. I don't know if you know them, but they're like local Twitter atheist people.
Sure.
But this was actually even better than those. As much as I thought those were good, this I thought was really cool. It was on point, substantive, and there's no real rancor in you in terms of how you approach the questions. You ask me questions. You do a bunch of things that I really liked. Like you when we were talking theologically, you talk as if, that's a big one. You weren't just trying to like bust my ass and like, let's nail the theist to the wall when he says this. Well, how could you do it? So it just felt totally different from your usual.
Not you. Because I know that's not you. And that's my ultimate point, is that just like when I asked you the question about is it justifiable for me to get help for disbelief, you came back with an honest answer, which was, no, I don't think that's justifiable. And that's because it's not you, the individual, that is that believes that kind of angry message. It's the idea that has been bestowed upon you. And naturally, you have to take the good with the bad. And so I don't look at you as somebody that's, my enemy, because on a human level, I think we all agree that should we have the opportunity to grab somebody's hand as they're being put into a lake of fire just because they didn't believe, we would grab it. 100%.
Yeah, probably.
I think that's
so
unifies us. So we're not very different.
No, we're not. And actually, I probably know a lot of people like you. When did you walk away from? Were you 20? Oh, okay.
Just kidding.
Are we done?
No, it was the sirens. I said I got to go. They're coming to get me.
Oh.
Uh-huh. What were you saying now, Greg? Go ahead.
When did you stop being a Christian? In your early 20s or something?
When I was 25.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I don't know. Like I said, this went really well, and I'd be really, really excited to come back on. I thought this was pretty cool. So, are we wrapping it up, or?
Yes. We usually go for about an hour and a half, just because of people's attention span. There's only so much.
No, that's totally fine. My wife is actually bugging me to get off.
I know. People could talk about this for hours, but we want to leave some for the next episode. You know what I mean? Have them come back.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Don't want to bring it all on the table.
I appreciate you coming by, and
yeah, man, very much. That was a great discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, I really thought it was. Thank you, guys.
I hope, and we got to talk SJ and staying longer next time.
Yeah. And Steve, do you have anything that you want to?
No, I was gonna do the Twitter Fells segment, but maybe I'll just do that tomorrow. I'm tired. We're at 2 hours, and
okay.
It's gonna be fun though. There's a lot of people in the Twitter thing today. It just blew up like 2,000 Twitters or something like that, or tweets. How do you say it? Tweets? I love that word. Tweets.
Oh, 2,000 tweets about 2,000 tweets about this discussion.
No, 2,000. No, it's 2,000. No, it was SJ and
hold your horses, Greg. You'll get there.
2,000 tweets from a thing that I said this morning, and it just took off. Right, left, back, forth, up, down. I got called a theist. I got called an atheist. I got called a liar. I got called, you name it. It was fun because I was like, this is atheist apologetics at its finest. People think that theists only have apologists. Well, I am here to tell you, there are atheist apologetics where they're just as silly an argument. I mean, people telling me that I'm a theist and literally thinking that's a good argument because reasons. I'm like, how would you possibly think I'm a theist?
So
I
here's
don't,
what we do,
I don't
Steve.
understand this. So
Here's
we're
what
gonna
we
have
do.
we're gonna have tweet fails tomorrow sometime.
Let-
That's not one of our channels.
Let's do this then, Steve. How about we say everybody come 30 minutes before the what I'm getting ready to talk about, and we'll do it like a pre-show.
When, tomorrow?
Yeah, before the debate.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so tomorrow we have the saga continuing from last week. If everybody knows the show and then the shit shows that followed between King Crocoduck and Dean Esme.
Oh, Dean Esme. I saw some of that.
Max Colby. So we have a what I think is going to be an epic debate because these two guys are brilliant, and the guy that we have coming to debate King Crocoduck tomorrow, I think he's going to surprise a lot of people because Steve has seen pretty much everything on the internet. I mean, very rarely.
Oh, you looked at my search browser history, didn't you?
Very rarely does he get surprised, and we.
Yeah, I was going to say I thought I'd delete that daily.
We were both surprised, I think, last night by the arguments that Sy brings up, and so tomorrow Dr. Sy will be coming on to debate King Crocoduck, and
he's very intelligent.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's very intelligent. He has a very good epistemic framework. I don't quite agree with his argument from abiogenesis complexity, but the guy is brilliant. I mean, he's a legit PhD in biochemistry.
He is. He has a view that you're not used to seeing, I think, in this, kind of arena of debates. And,
yeah, it's going to be great.
It's going to be a really great debate. That will be tomorrow at 8:00. We're excited about both of them coming. Obviously, King Crocoduck coming back. Join us 30 minutes before. We'll be here at 7:30 and do we'll let Steve fill us in. My phone was going off all day long with Twitter messages.
Yeah, there was thousands of tweets on this. I don't think I'm even exaggerating or being hyperbolic. I mean, I was getting 150 notifications every time I was clearing out my. You click on that button, and it clears it out. Yeah, I
had to delete my notifications. I had to turn them off because it was just getting to be ridiculous. Like, I don't know who you were fighting.
Who was it? I had the entire Twitter atheist community responding, and like 4 people finally understood it, and they were actually on my side, but the rest didn't understand my argument. And I was trying to test out this argument to see, okay, let's run it and see what happens, as a test, and float it up there. And yeah, it was fun.
So that people can kind of get their ideas before tomorrow, like just not expand on.
Oh, you want a spoiler?
Well, just say what it is so that people can be thinking about it. Maybe they'll have kind of something to add to it.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so tomorrow, this is my argument again. If I could be right, wrong, or different, this is just an opinion-based argument. I know, thank you. I think I should get all the women in the entire world. No, okay, so
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, he doesn't care. Frankie would probably care. He's married, so he'd be like, "You ain't getting that one." Well, then again, it'd be like, "Yeah, maybe. Go ahead."
We're going way off chart now.
I know. This is the fun hour, though. Okay, so my tweet was simply that my advice to theists that run into an atheist that only sits there and says, "I don't believe you," I recommend to that theist that they say, "Thank you very much. I don't care. You don't believe me. Walk away and find an atheist that actually wants to take a position and have a conversation with them." And the reason I say that is, and SJ, by the way, agrees with me on this, but the reason I say that is because I have watched these discussions where a theist will just say something and an atheist will go, "Okay, well, I don't believe you. You have the burden of proof." And at that point, I'd be like, "Okay, so what? Get the hell out of here." If I said, "I bought a brand new red car today," and Frankie says, "Well, I don't believe you," I'd be like, "Okay, who gives a shit? I'm going to be driving it right now. Bye-bye."
I was going to say, I do that same thing every day.
It makes no difference what Frankie believes me or not. Now, if Frankie said, "Hey, I believe you didn't buy a new red car today," I'd be like, "Oh, really? You got a position on this. Let's talk." Right? So there's a huge difference there. And I just don't think theists should waste their time with people that don't want to have, an actual
Real
conversation.
conversations.
How is
Yeah,
this controversial?
I'm with that.
How is this a thing? Like,
Oh, you'd be surprised, dude. I didn't think it was that controversial too, because I had a lot of theists agree with me, and people say, "Oh, well, if a theist agrees with Steve, it must be a bad argument." Well, no, not necessarily, because SJ was agreeing with me.
that is such a thing that people do. Like, I do that. I don't know how many times a day. Like, I hear from my boss or something. Like, I turned this in yesterday. Well, I didn't get it, or I don't think you did. I mean, so what? And you move on. Like, how is that controversial?
Well, I guess we're going to find out tomorrow when people give both sides of that. And I want them to really think about that. I mean, do you really want to listen to an argument, one person saying, I believe God exists, and the other says, okay, well, I don't believe you. What the hell is that kind of conversation that? I don't want to have discussions like that. I mean, here you came, Craig, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Craig's, Craig has a position. He has a belief. I want to know about his beliefs. So we can talk about his beliefs and then talk about my beliefs and compare them. And then other people can see which beliefs, sound more credible.
Yeah, it leads to a real conversation. That's why I was saying when we were having theological conversations about whether God is free will or not, you guys were talking about it as if God exists, which you have to do to have a real theological conversation.
I'm fine with that.
Oftentimes I've gone on atheist shows and we will have that conversation and they'll go, well, prove it. Prove God is real. And I'm like, okay, let's just go away. I shouldn't be here because this is so annoying. This is just ridiculous.
I literally had someone tell me that you have to prove God before it can be disproved. I'm like, well, no, you can disprove a certain God. I can disprove the younger creationist God if I wanted to, right? I think most of us can do that. I don't have to prove that he exists first to disprove him. And
that's so about people wanting to be right, though, Steve. I mean,
it's weird, dude. It is so weird because, like I said, I don't think these things are that controversial.
I have a solution to your problem, Steve. And then I promise, ladies and gentlemen, we will jet out here and leave you alone. You should have phrased it differently if you wanted to avoid the controversy. Your question should have been.
Think what you just said.
Do you give a shit whether people believe you about particular issues? Do you give a shit whether you're believed or not? That would have, I guarantee.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think that's how I would have phrased my argument. Because I mean, I think all of us want to be believed. I think all of us have arguments they want to find other people that agree with. Now, if they don't, sure, that's fine too.
But do you care if they ultimately do, though?
No.
Yeah, right. So it's not controversial. People stop making things that aren't a thing. 2000.
Yeah, when it says I don't believe you, it's just like, okay.
Yeah, fine. Fuck off.
Yeah. They don't seem to understand how boring a conversation that is.
Save it.
Well, that's the point.
I'm gonna rein you in.
The conversation gets boring.
All right, Craig, maybe you come back tomorrow too. Maybe, I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Because well, at least for that segment.
Yeah, that's fine. I have no problem with that. Two things before we close out. Tomorrow the debate at 8:00 or 7:30. Excuse me. We'll do a pre-show and then we'll get straight into that.
It's a warm up while everybody else is getting notifications because I gotta tell you right now.
Yeah.
YouTube is having major issues with notifications. It's not you, it's not us, it's YouTube. And I know there's a lot of content creators that have said the same thing. So I think it's pretty well ubiquitous that YouTube is not doing the notifications again, right?
And we're gonna make this announcement tomorrow. But since this has been just a great show and I'm feeling good, we're gonna announce another big debate coming up. This one it's a ways off, but it will be worth the wait in September. In addition to having Matt Dillahunty join us on April the 24th, which is a Tuesday at 6 o'clock. Cool. Just gotta get a plug in. Well, cool. That we've had that one, but I just wanted to get it plugged in. We actually have, if anybody remembers, and how could you forget the debate with Kent Hovind and Dr. Herman Mays? Dr. Herman Mays will be coming back to enter in a debate. This one will be a formal debate. It will be structured, and it will be with Answers in Genesis, Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, which is a huge get for us, and I'm happy that he is agreed to come on. That's going to be a fantastic discussion, I think. So we just want to kind of put that there. We're going to make the official announcement tomorrow, but the date we're still working on. We'll get back to you guys as soon as that is finalized, but we're looking at September based on Dr. Jensen's schedule. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's we got some awesome stuff coming out. Real quick before I end it, I just wanted to clarify. I say things on Twitter and on the internet because I believe them. And I will justify my beliefs. I don't say them for ratings. I will never, ever, ever take a position just for ratings. I will say things that I believe. And I think that we all should be like that. So if somebody wants to, tomorrow afternoon, 7 o'clock Eastern, be there.
Shots fired.
Hey, you know what? Hey, I got an idea, Kyle, before we end this. We're supposed to, have a chance for a couple to people to come in, a couple of subscribers to come in. So maybe we should ask people if they want to come in tomorrow for that 30-minute pre-show, and they could take me on one-on-one, or us.
Fine.
I'm okay with that. Or if they support me, that's fine too. On that particular, I'm happy to have that discussion on that tweet.
I'm with that.
Okay.
We'll just have it. We'll just have a free for all prior to the debate.
Just do it.
We'll start about the tweets, and then whatever you guys want to talk about. I think that'll be kind of a cool thing to, if you have ideas or things that you want to see, we listen. Actually, Dr. Jensen was somebody got in contact with us and said he would do that debate. So we set that up based on somebody's suggestion. So we do listen, we do read. Some of them are a pleasure to read. The others are a pleasure to read for a completely different reason. So
we'll have a whole show on those, though.
Yeah, keep them coming either way, whether it's good, bad. I love being insulted, so I usually pin those to the top. So please, by all means, rein those in. But anyway, Frankie, as always, the best producer ever. Thank you for being here from the Geek Room.
I didn't know if anybody can hear me, but you're welcome.
My man. And Steve, and real quick, I think I was calling you Greg the entire time.
Yeah, I let it slide. Craig. Craig is Craig.
Okay, see, I did get his name right, so I don't feel so bad.
It's although I don't feel bad because you spent like literally 5 minutes calling me a redneck, so we're even.
I kind of danced around it, didn't I? I don't know if I came right out and said it. I kind of danced around the idea that, you might be a redneck. But I didn't.
We're going to let Greg keep going, everybody. Good night.
Good night.